back in the woods.
Morning guys, Dave Canterbury with the Pathfinder School, back out here at the Pathfinder School property classroom. What I wanted to discuss with you guys today was I wanted to talk about the one tool option that's often discussed in survival and self-reliance today versus historical evidence of tools and the usage of tools. You know, myself, I have created the Pathfinder knife as a one tool option. So I have fallen into the same theory of thinking that a lot of people have fallen into with, you know, I need to have a knife that can do everything I need it to do. And I think that's probably true in a sense of, if I lose everything I have, what's going to be attached to my body? Well, my knife is always going to be attached to my body. I'll probably never lose that if I fall out of a canoe, whatever the case may be, fall into the river. So I need that one tool to be able to perform all the tasks necessary that all of my other tools could perform if I had them. It's not going to perform them perfectly. No one tool option will. But a one tool option has to be functional in the fact that it can do small carving, that it can do chopping if needs be. It can be batoned, as is oftentimes talked about in the bushcraft and survival world today, and we even teach it at the Pathfinder School, how to baton your knives. More knives get broken that way probably than anything else, and it's because they're not designed to be batoned. You're not supposed to cut wood or chop wood with your knife. You're supposed to do it with an axe or a saw. But due to the one tool option theory that many of us have, and I'm guilty of that as well sometimes, and I overlook other things because of that, we design knives that are meant to take the abuse and use of a one tool option. However, are they the best option for everyday carry for people who are recreating in the woods, doing bushcrafting, practicing their skills and things of that nature? Probably not. While the Pathfinder knife was designed after an 18th century trade knife profile, it is pretty thick. It will still do a very good job of skinning and carving, and it does a pretty good job of chopping. It does a real good job with batoning, but when it comes to intricate carving tasks, it could be a little bit smaller. So it's not perfect for everything, although it is the best option I've found for everything. So what I want to talk to you guys about today is, I want to talk to you about the historical evidence of the multiple use of tools and why cultures carried multiple tools. Because one of my theories of survivability that I've always talked about has been, I'm always going to go tool heavy. If I have to opt things out of my kit, it's not going to be tools. I'm going to have the 5 C's of survivability. I'm going to have that one main cutting tool. I'll probably put the other 5 C's in there to give me a 10-piece kit that's very small and compact. And then tools are where I'm going to go heavy with the fluff. So let's talk about Paleolithic era evidence, evidence from the 1700s, evidence from the 1800s, and then what's available or what a lot of woodsmen carry today to give them that multiple tool option that's very similar and reminiscent throughout history. And that's what I want to explain to you guys, is how reminiscent everything is from 3,000 years ago to today. Okay, so first let's talk about Paleolithic times, the time that Otzi came from. Now Otzi obviously had a copper axe head with him, a smelted copper axe that I do not have a copy of to show you. But other tools that would have been considered a very high and fine, living high off the hog tool to have had back then. Otzi would have been considered a very wealthy man to have had that copper axe. The majority of your Paleolithic people would have had a stone axe head, like this stone hand axe that we made in a video past. And they would have used that for their heavy chopping tool to cut trees, process larger pieces of firewood and things of that nature. Along with that, they would have had several shards of flint that could have been used for blanks, for making arrowheads if needed, but they also could have been used for small gutting and skinning tools or just cutting cordage. And then they would have had their knife, like this bone-handled knife, very similar to what Otzi carried, except this one's in a deer skin, a deer leg pouch with a neck wrap of deer hide around it. But this would have been very similar to what Otzi carried. So he would have had, or the Neolithic people, would have had several cutting tool options at their available. They would have had hand axes, they would have had small shards of flint, and then they would have had mounted or hafted blades as well. And then again, they would have had, just like Otzi had, a bow and arrow. So he had a tool specifically dedicated, plus a net, to capture food, but he had plenty of tools to process that food, process that resource to make other tools and clothing and things out of. Okay, so now let's step up into the late 16th, 17th century. I have read on several accounts in books that one thing that every woodsman had from the time he was a boy was what was considered a clasp knife or a folding knife. And this is a very good example of a very simple folding knife from Finland, made by Opinel. It's got a single blade with a very simple turn locking mechanism on it. And that would be used for whittling. That would be their whittling type knife. And whittling was a pastime of the woodsman all the way back even in the 18th century. There are accounts of woodsmen who actually recreated or whittled rifle stocks for their muzzle loaders in the woods using their whittling knife, which would have been their clasp knife. So this would have been used for any major carving tasks. Now, they also carried some type of a belt knife, and this is very indicative of the type of belt knife that they would carry. It's a little over 6 inches in blade length. It's a fairly thin blade. This one may be 3/16 actually, but not quarter or any bigger. It has curly maple handles on it. It is a full tang design. So it's a pretty bulletproof knife that you're not going to tear up. But the woodsman was very careful in writings that I've read to keep this knife absolutely skinning animal sharp. And he did not do much work with this knife other than processing hides and food. His workhorse was his whittling knife or his belt axe or tomahawk. Both were carried, as well as larger axes. So he had 3 cutting tools at least available to him all the time to meet the different tasks that he would have to do within a camp. He didn't just rely on a one-tool option. And I'm sure that the whittling knife was in his shooting bag or in a pouch on his belt. I'm sure that this knife was attached to his body as well as his tomahawk. So the chance of him losing any of those 3 was pretty slim unless he was just buck naked, and then he probably lost them all. Okay, so walking forward into the 1800s, let's take an example from George Washington Sears, or Nesmith, and the tools that he carried. And these are very similar to the tools that he carried. He carried a folding knife. Now, this is not exactly like the one that he carried, but it's a 2-blade folding knife. This one's a Queen Cutlery, number 39, I believe. And he carried an Imperial folding knife, but he had a folding knife with 2 blades. And again, the 2 blades gave him an option of keeping one of them scalpel sharp for skinning and gutting fish and things like that. And then he had a whittling blade that he could use for smaller tasks. He also carried the infamous Nesmith style knife, which this is a very good copy of as far as blade length and size goes, and profile and design, that he would use for other tasks. But he would keep this very sharp for skinning animals, processing game, processing food, and things of that nature. And then he carried the double bit belt axe with 2 different grinds so that he had 2 different tools in one. So Nesmith's idea of being tool heavy was to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 blades on him at any given time for different tasks. So he again, probably had this folding knife, was probably in his pouch on a belt. This knife was around his neck, and the belt axe was probably carried on his belt. So unless something very drastic happened, he would never lose one of those knives or one of those cutting tools. He didn't have it in a backpack like we do so much today, where if he lost his backpack, he lost his cutting implements. He would have always had them with him. So moving forward, into the late or the 19th century, into the 20th century and things like that, we have the availability of large axes, and they had the availability of those even back in the frontier era, but they were generally only carried or used when they had horses available to carry them. They would carry smaller axes if they were carrying it on their body than a large axe like this forest axe. We also have thicker bladed, heavier knives today, like this one from Diving Sparrow. That's a beautiful knife to carry. Gives you a second cutting option. It can do small tasks and big tasks pretty decent in case you were to lose everything else. And then the Pathfinder knife, also designed to do the same things. Now with the Pathfinder knife, I do have the option in here with the Pathfinder spear point, which gives you another small cutting tool with 2 blades on it that can be used for a hunting weapon, or it can be used as a cutting tool. All you have to do is haft a small shaft to it, like a hardwood branch or something like that. And then the multi-tool obviously gives you multiple blades. So if you carry most of these things attached to your body, your knife is obviously going to be attached to your body all of the time. In the case of this Pathfinder, you have 2 blades attached to your body all the time. Your multi-tool will generally be in a pouch on your belt connected to your body, so you're going to have that option. Then you need to think about, axe, saw. In the eastern woodlands in the summertime, I'd probably go with a saw. In the wintertime, I'd go with an axe. Doesn't necessarily have to be an axe the size of this forest axe. We've went through a lot of different axe options, or belt axes, or hatchets, and things of that nature. But I think that that's a very good option in the winter. Again, in the north woods, that's a better option than a saw in my opinion. But you need to carry something that you can keep on your body or close to your body if needs be, because you don't want to lose it if you're trying to keep that option available to you. And that's where I think some of these one-tool options shine. If I want to put this on my backpack or strap it to my canoe or whatever the case may be, if I lose it, I still have the availability to process, or the ability to process, larger pieces of wood by batoning my heavier knife. And that's where we've gotten to, I think, in this century and in this theory of bushcraft and survival that we all think about today. But remember, your knife is not meant to be a wood processing tool other than carving tasks. It's really meant to process game and things of that nature. And you should have smaller blades that are capable of doing whittling tasks and smaller things, and then a saw or an axe, belt axe, hatchet type option that you can use for processing your firewood. Okay guys, well I hope you enjoyed this short discussion this morning about tools, one-tool options, and being tool heavy. We talked about things all the way from the Neolithic period to modern day. We showed you examples of everything, talked about some of the reasons behind why they carried what they did and why we carry now what we do. And I hope this enlightens you as far as selecting the items that you're going to put in your kit, be it an emergency kit or an everyday kit. And remember that there is no one perfect tool, there is no one perfect knife. Everything is environmental and everything is situationally dependent. And generally speaking, in an emergency situation, the best tool you can have is the one that's strapped to your body. So I appreciate everything you guys do for me. I appreciate everything you do for my school, for my business, and for my family. I'll be back with another video as soon as I can. Thank you.